Every time you check your phone for directions, you're using technology created by a black woman whose name was hidden for decades. Her name is Dr. Gladys West, and without her mathematical genius, GPS wouldn't exist. No navigation apps, no delivery tracking, no finding your way home. But for most of her life, nobody knew her name. And that's not an accident. This is the story of how one woman's brilliance was buried and why it took over 60 years for the world to finally say her name. Picture this. It's 1930 in Sutherland, Virginia, a tiny farming town in the segregated South where being black means limited options and being a black woman means even fewer. Gladys May Brown, that's her maiden name, was born into this world. Her parents were farmers who worked land from sunrise to sunset. Society had already decided her future before she could even walk. She'd work the fields, just like her parents. Education beyond basics? That wasn't for people like her. The world had drawn a line, and she was supposed to stay on one side of it. But Gladys had something nobody could take away. A mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos. Numbers made sense to her in a way that felt almost magical. While other kids played outside, she'd lose herself in math problems, finding beauty in equations that would make most people's heads spin. She'd sit there working through problems, not because a teacher told her to, but because she genuinely loved it. Math didn't care about the color of her skin. 2 plus 2 was always 4, whether you were black or white, rich or poor. Her teachers noticed. They saw something special in this quiet girl who could solve problems faster than kids twice her age. But notice this. Being good at math in a segregated southern town wasn't enough. She needed to be exceptional. Not just better than her classmates, better than everyone. Because that's what it took for a black girl in 1940s Virginia to get anywhere. She worked hard. Harder than most people can imagine. Stayed up late studying by candlelight. Helped her family during the day and hit the books at night. And when high school ended, she graduated as valedictorian, top of her entire class. That scholarship to Virginia State College. She earned every single bit of it. This wasn't handed to her. This was fought for line by line, equation by equation. Virginia State College was a historically black university, one of the few places where a young black woman could study mathematics without being told she didn't belong. She threw herself into her studies, mastering calculus, geometry, algebra, everything they could teach her. And in 1952, she walked across that stage with a mathematics degree in her hand. She was 22 years old, and she'd just done something most people in her hometown thought was impossible. Now here's where it gets interesting. This was the early 50s. The Cold War was heating up. America and the Soviet Union were in a technological arms race, and the Soviets had just shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit Earth. Suddenly, America was behind. The government started pouring money into satellites, weapons, defense systems, anything that could help them catch up. They needed mathematicians, brilliant ones. And despite all the racism, despite all the barriers, they couldn't ignore talent when national security was on the line. But even with her degree, opportunities for a black woman were almost non-existent. She taught math for a few years at a school in Virginia, but she wanted more. She wanted to be where the real work was happening, where the future was being built. In 1956, Gladys got a job at the Naval Proving Ground in Dahlgren, Virginia. Let that sink in for a second. The Naval Proving Ground was a military research facility where some of the most advanced technology in the world was being developed, and she was the second black woman ever hired there. Out of hundreds and hundreds of employees, only 4 were black. Think about that. Walking into work every day knowing you're not just representing yourself but an entire race in the eyes of people who didn't think you should be there. Every mistake you make gets blamed on your race. Every success you have gets called a fluke. The pressure must have been crushing. But Gladys didn't crack. She did the opposite. She excelled. The computers back then weren't like what we have now. These were massive IBM machines that filled entire rooms, humming and clicking and generating so much heat you'd sweat just standing next to them. They were temperamental beasts that broke down constantly, required punch cards to operate, and could only do a fraction of what a cheap smartphone does today. But back then, these machines were cutting edge, and operating them required both mathematical brilliance and mechanical patience. And Gladys? She didn't just operate them, she mastered them. She pushed them further than anyone thought possible. Her job was to collect data from satellites orbiting Earth and use it to create mathematical models of the planet's shape. Now, you might think that sounds simple. Earth is round, right? Just make a sphere and call it a day.
Wrong.
Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It's lumpy, irregular, bulging at the equator, flattened at the poles, with mountains and valleys and ocean trenches that throw everything off. To build accurate navigation systems, you need to know exactly where every point on Earth sits in three-dimensional space, down to the meter, sometimes down to the centimeter. This wasn't just solving a math problem on paper. This was teaching a machine to understand the physical world, and that's incredibly difficult. Gladys worked on something called Project Pluto in the early 1960s. This was one of the first major projects where computers were used to calculate satellite orbits with extreme precision. She'd take data from satellites, feed it into these massive computers using punch cards, and then wait hours or sometimes days for the machine to spit out results. If there was an error in the data, which happened constantly, she'd have to start over. If the computer broke down, which also happened constantly, she'd have to start over. It was painstaking, exhausting work that required absolute precision. One decimal point in the wrong place, and the entire calculation would be worthless, but she kept going. And the models she created were better than anything anyone had made before. Then in the 1970s, she worked on CSAT, the first satellite specifically designed to measure the oceans from space. This was groundbreaking stuff. Nobody had ever tried to map the ocean floor from orbit before. The data coming back was messy, incomplete, full of noise and errors. But Gladys developed mathematical techniques to clean it up, to extract useful information from chaos. She taught the computers how to process imperfect data and still come up with accurate results. Here's where things get wild. What Gladys was doing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was programming computers to process massive amounts of satellite data, apply complex algorithms, and generate predictions about Earth's shape. She was making machines simulate reality. The geodetic models she created required computers to take imperfect data, account for errors, make adjustments, and gradually refine their calculations until they got closer and closer to the truth. Think about that process for a second. Take data, process it, check for errors, adjust, run it again, get a better result, run it again, get an even better result. Keep going until you reach the level of accuracy you need. That iterative process, that constant refinement, that's the foundation of how modern computing works. And Gladys was doing this decades before most people even knew what a computer was. In the 1980s, she published a paper, 42 pages of dense mathematics laying out the framework for calculating Earth's geoid. Now, a geoid is basically a mathematical model of Earth's shape that accounts for all the lumps and bumps and irregularities. It's incredibly complex. Most people couldn't even understand the abstract of her paper, let alone the whole thing. But for the scientists and engineers working on navigation systems, this paper was gold, pure gold. Because here's the thing. If you want to build a system that can tell someone exactly where they are on Earth at any given moment, you need to know the shape of Earth with extreme precision. And that's exactly what Gladys had figured out. Her mathematical models became the foundation, the bedrock, the starting point for what would eventually become GPS, Global Positioning System. The technology in your phone, your car, your watch. The reason delivery drivers find your house. The reason planes don't crash into each other. The reason soldiers can navigate enemy territory. The reason you can track your Uber in real time. All of it traces back to mathematical models that Gladys West spent decades perfecting. And for years, nobody knew. Decades passed. The technology spread across the world. GPS became one of the most important inventions of the 20th century. Billions of people used it every single day. But if you asked them who invented it, they wouldn't say Gladys West. They probably wouldn't be able to name anyone. She retired in 1998 after working for the Navy for 42 years. 42 years of groundbreaking work. 42 years of mathematical brilliance. And still, no public recognition. Her colleagues knew. The scientists who used her models knew. The engineers who built GPS systems knew. But the world? The world had no idea that a black woman from rural Virginia had helped create one of the most important technologies of the modern age.
Why?
How does someone contribute that much and stay invisible? The answer isn't complicated. It's the same reason you don't learn about Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, or Mary Jackson in school unless someone makes a movie about them. Black women in science and technology have always been erased. Not because their work wasn't important, not because they didn't achieve enough, but because the people writing the history books, the people giving out awards, the people deciding whose stories get told, didn't think their stories mattered. It's easier to give credit to the institutions. The Navy developed GPS. The military created this technology. But institutions don't do math, people do. And one of the most important people in that entire story was being left out. But here's where things finally start to change. In 2015, Gladys was at an event, just a regular gathering, when someone asked her about her career. She mentioned she'd worked at Dahlgren for over 40 years, worked on satellite data and Earth modeling. And the person asking was stunned. They realized what she'd done. They started asking more questions, digging into her work, and slowly the truth started coming out. By 2018, she couldn't be ignored anymore. She was inducted into the Air Force Space and Missile Pioneers Hall of Fame. She was 87 years old. 87. She'd been retired for 20 years. Most of her colleagues had already passed away. But finally, someone was saying her name out loud. Saying what she'd done. Giving her the credit she deserved. Articles started appearing. News stories, documentaries. People started asking the obvious question. How did we not know about her? How did her story stay hidden for so long? And more importantly, how many other Gladys Wests are out there? How many other black women, brown women period, whose work changed the world but whose names got erased? Because here's the hard truth. Gladys West didn't just contribute to GPS. She was essential to it. Her models, her mathematics, her decades of work. That's not a footnote. That's not a fun fact to throw into a diversity presentation. That's foundational. Remove her from the story and GPS doesn't work the way it does. Maybe it doesn't work at all. Maybe someone else figures it out eventually, but it takes longer, costs more, and we're still catching up. She proved that genius has no color, that brilliance can come from anywhere, that the girl working in tobacco fields could grow up to teach machines how to see the world. Her work touches billions of lives every single day. Every time you check your location, order food delivery, use a rideshare app, or just try to find your way somewhere new, you're benefiting from work that Gladys West did. Work that she did while being ignored, while being invisible, while being told, in 1,000 small ways, that she didn't belong. And even now, even after she's been honored, most people still don't know her name. Ask 10 people on the street who invented GPS. Maybe 1 or 2 will guess the military. Nobody will say Gladys West. And that's the problem. Because when we erase people from history, we're not just being unfair to them. We're lying about how progress actually happens. We're telling young black girls that nobody who looks like them has ever done anything important. We're creating a world where the same patterns repeat, where the same people get left out, where brilliance gets ignored because it doesn't come in the package we expect. Gladys West is 94 years old now. She's lived long enough to see herself recognized, to see her name in articles and books, to know that her story is finally being told. But think about all the years she didn't have that. All the years she worked in silence, knowing what she'd accomplished but never hearing anyone else acknowledge it. Her story isn't just inspiring, it's a warning. A reminder that we're probably doing the same thing right now to someone else. Ignoring someone's contributions because they don't fit our mental image of what a scientist or engineer or inventor looks like. So next time you open Google Maps, remember her. Dr. Gladys West, the mathematician who taught machines to understand Earth. The woman whose genius was hidden for decades. The pioneer whose name should be known by everyone who's ever used GPS. Because she didn't just help build the future. She made sure you'd never get lost in it.